We'll quickly see what we did last time, last two sentences, and then go to the next canto, canto 13. Onward he passed to a diviner sphere. He, of course, stands for Ashwapati. And he says he is now going from the spiritual planes of mind to diviner planes. Diviner planes. Spiritual planes of mind are there. Even, well, everything is divine, but he says diviner, much richer in the divine qualities. You see. They are joined in a common greatness, light and peace. Joined in common greatness, light and bliss. He is climbing the staircase. On the one side of the staircase are the kingdoms of deathless rose. On the other side of the staircase are the kingdoms of deathless flame. And that is the occult inner growth of spiritual planes and the spiritual planes above here, the climbing up. Now it is they who are joining in the overmind. Greatness, light and bliss. Bliss stands for rose of God. Light stands for flame, deathless flame. All high and beautiful and desirable power. Beautiful and desirable power. The beautiful again, rose, powers, flame, forgetting the difference and their separate reign. See, below the overmind, even in the overmind, each god, each goddess, each power has its own distinct character and it will try to assert itself in its own individuality. Therefore, there are differences. There is a difference between Vishnu and Shiva and Brahma and all the gods and goddesses. They have got kind of differences, their own functions all there. But now he is going beyond that, where these differences are going to disappear. Forgetting the difference and the separate reign, become a single multitudinous whole up there. That is the diviner sphere. It is in the diviner sphere, it is there that all these powers become one, they get united. There is the multiplicity. So the multiplicity starts with the overmind, and then you have got separation, analysis. Well, the whole purpose is you want to have individuals. You want to have many individuals with divine qualities. Each soul having something of his own in the manifestation. That is the whole idea of multiplicity, and therefore the beginning of multiplicity is with the overmind. Above the overmind, it is all oneness. There are beings, there are powers, but then they are not kind of separate. They are not distinct. So, overmind is the one which kind of brings separation from each other like that, you see. Above the parting, the roads of time. So, he in fact, it is the journey of Ashwapati. Onward he passed to diviner sphere. After going through these kingdoms of the deathless rose and of deathless flame, he is entering into the diviner spheres, actually. And then what happens? About the parting the roads of time, parting of the roads of time, that is happening in our mind. That is happening in our mind. About the silence and its thousandfold word, thousandfold power of expression. Word is the power of expression, thousandfold. Many expressions, many individualities. That is the whole idea. Thousandfold. Thousand stands for multiplicity. Thousand stands for multiplicity, and that is the character of overmind. But in the overmind, although there is multiplicity, there is a kind of globality, cosmicity, universality. It can embrace all of them, yet make them separate, keep them separate, you see. Above the silence and its thousandfold word, silent, until now it is silent Brahman, passive Brahman, and its expression, thousandfold word, in the immutable and inviolate truth, immutable truth, that is only the supermind. In the supermind, you see, forever united and inseparable. That is the character of Supermind. Inseparable, united. The radiant children of eternity dwell. See, earlier you had desirable powers with differences. Desirable powers with differences. Now, when he is entering into that truth, then ever united and inseparable. They become inseparable. The radiant children of eternity dwell. Well, he has not named the children, but then they are the transcendental gods. The transcendental gods. The gods of supermind, and above them, they are the transcendental powers, transcendental gods. And they know each other. Varuna, Mitra, Bhaga, Aryamana, Savitra, they are the transcendental gods, you see. They know, understand, they have their own character, but then at the same time there is a harmony of working amongst all these gods and goddesses there in the transcendent. Therefore, they are the radiant children of eternity dwell on a wide spirit height where all are one. So that is the character of oneness of supermind. So here it was a thousandfold thing, now it is oneness. Oneness with multiplicity. That is the nature of supermind. Oneness, multiplicity in the oneness. Oneness is there. Oneness does not forget multiplicity, multiplicity does not forget oneness. Whereas in the case of overmind, there is a separation between the two, you see. So that is how
those gods, Mitra, Varuna, and so are in overmind.
Overmind. These are the overmind gods. The thousandfold word is overmind. Thousandfold is the character of overmind. Multiplicity. Actually, there is an Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, where a rishi is performing sacrifices and he is giving gifts to all the participants, the learned people who are present for the yajna, for the sacrifice. Now, after giving all the presents to these learned people, the rishis, accomplished souls, siddhas and all that thing, his son asked him, but to whom are you giving me? He asked me, to whom are you giving me? You are giving all precious things, to whom are you giving me? You see, he asked him. And then this man gets kind of irritated. Gautama Rishi, he gets irritated and he says, I am going to give you to Yama, to death. I am going to give you to Yama, to death, you see. And then his name is Nachiketa. So Nachiketa goes to Yama's house. Yama is out of station. Yama is out of station for some work or whatever it be. And he waits at the door of Yama's mansion for 3 nights. He waits there for Yama's arrival for 3 nights there. Now, these are all very symbolic things. 3 nights, the physical, the vital, the mental lines which are there, he has crossed them and now he is kind of getting ready to meet the God. So he waits there at his house, at the door of his house for 3 nights. And then Yama comes, and then because he was waiting for him, Yama says, okay, I will give you this boon, that is this, that thing. But this boy says, no, I don't want all that kind of a thing. This is, at one point of time, then he removes a necklace with 1,000 beads from his neck, a necklace with 1,000 beads, and he offers it to him. To this Nachiketa boy, 1,000 beads. Now again, it means that Yama has given him all the knowledge of overmind. 1,000 beads, 1,000 pearls, which are there, the multiplicity of this creation, his knowledge he has removed and given it to him completely, you see. But then the boy says, I am sorry, I don't want all that kind of thing. I want to know what is it that survives death. What is that survival? I want that knowledge and that accomplishment. And then Yama dissuades him, and ultimately he gives the knowledge of survival of immortality to Nachiketa. So, see, our mind in that sense is a kind of a trap also, a bit. You have offered him a very beautiful gift, but then if you get stuck with that, you remain only in multiplicity. Your preparation, your aspiration should be for the one single thing alone, nothing else but that. This boy had that capacity. Now, although this is told like a story, katha is in fact the Upanishad called story. Katha means story. Katha Upanishad, story. Now, the very fact that his father gets irritated is not really irritation. In fact, he is leading his son into a higher knowledge which can be given only by God Himself, by Yama himself. Yama is the person who knows all these things, the creation, the law of death, the law of immortality. He knows all that thing, and therefore he says, "Okay, go to Yama." And this boy stays there for 3 nights at the gate, and then gets ready, that kind of a thing. So, thousandfold is a typically significant word in the spiritual literature, which characterizes multiplicity, which characterizes the overmind display of powers, you see, thousandfold. So here it's very clear, thousandfold word expression, creation, manifestation, thousandfold, see. That is supreme, so that is overmind manifestation. So above the silence and the thousandfold word, in the inviolate truth, on the wide spirit height, where all are one, live these children of God, this is there, the transcendental gods. Well, this is what we had last time, and now we'll come to the next canto, canto 13, in the self of mind, in self of mind. So we have canto 13, canto 14, canto 15, 3 cantos remaining. Then we will have gone through Savitri in our this reading of Savitri. During the last 7 years we have been doing it, and I hope we'll be soon celebrating the completion of our reading. Now, this canto is a really short canto. In fact, it is almost like a section in other cantos. Just hardly 42 sentences, 182 lines, 1365 words, 1365 words, 42 sentences, 183 lines. So it's a relatively short section. But in the hierarchy of description, it has a significant place. See, until now you had the inner path climbing up, you had the spiritual path climbing up, and these paths are going to join in the silence somewhere there, and then they will merge into the higher knowledge, into the world soul up there in canto 14. They will merge there. See. At last there came a bare, indifferent sky. Bare, nothing there. Indifferent sky, indifferent. It doesn't concern, the sky doesn't concern about your pain and anguish and joy and pleasure. It's not worried at all about that. It is indifferent to all these happenings in this creation, to mortality, to death, to ignorance, to knowledge, to ananda. It is totally indifferent. It is a kind of a detached Purusha who stands away from everything, who stands away from, therefore it is a self of mind, detached Purusha, Atman, who stands away from everything, completely, you see, detached, self of mind, Manomaya Purusha, pure Manomaya Purusha. It is he who is standing behind all things. At last there came a bare, indifferent sky, where silence listened to the cosmic voice, all this creation which has been climbing up, all the powers which are there working there. We have already seen the various powers of mind itself. First the lower mind, then the middle mind, then the higher powers of mind, greater points. All of them, they are the cosmic voices of that thing, you see, cosmic voices, but answered nothing to a million calls. The cause of each of this world, it doesn't care at all. It remains indifferent, detached. Okay, make noise, go out. It doesn't bother at all, you see. The soul's endless question met with no response. So this self of mind doesn't care at all about anything. It does not give any answer to the soul's questions. It does not give any answer to the soul. What could be the questions of the soul? That this self of mind doesn't bother at all about that thing. The soul has a question here. Why am I here for? What for I am here? Why this ignorance? Why this knowledge? Why this division? Why this multiplicity? What is ananda? What is anguish? What is mortality? What is fate? These are the questions the soul is asking. But this guy says, sorry, forget about it, I don't know. He doesn't care at all. So these are the questions the soul is asking. But this indifferent sky doesn't bother at all about anything. The soul's endless question met with no response. The soul's endless question. The soul's, I am endless. Trochee, question. Trochee, met with. Trochee, no response. Anapist. No response. The soul's endless question. You see, you can read like that. The soul's endless question met with no response. But that wouldn't at all, you see. It is the soul's endless question met with no response. The trochees are important that way here, you see. You have got three trochees. Endless question met with no response. Three trochees. Very unusual, metrically. An abrupt conclusion ended eager hopes. So because the soul is not going to meet any response at all, so there is no hope. Endless hope. Ended eager hopes. It is expecting something, but the sky doesn't care at all about it. A deep cessation in a mighty calm. So all this cosmic noise, turmoil, struggle, all that thing is completely stopped. That is why it is silence. A deep cessation, a mighty calm, a finny line on the last page of thought. So he has described a dozen planes of thought. Now you are coming to a book where the last page is describing thought, and on the last page is the finny line, the final line. End. This is the end. This is the conclusion. Finny line. Finny line. Well, fini is a very common word in English, but it is more of a French than English. Final, end, concluding, fini line. But I think FINI is the proper word, no? Not FINIS. FINI.
Without S.
Not without S, no?
Yeah.
Without S, yeah. French is without S, but plural of fini is with S.
Yeah.
Plural of fini is with S. So this is fini line, plural. He doesn't say fini lines, he says fini line.
Line without S.
Yeah. On the last page of thought. So we have really turned all these cantos starting from canto 10 onward, and now we have come to the last page of the book. There you see, fini line. On the last page of thought, and a margin and a blank of wordless peace. So in the book, you have got margins, you have got blank, and then there is nothing written on that, you see. So he has come to that indifferent sky, there you see. There paused the climbing hierarchy of world. The climbing hierarchy, he has described the entire hierarchy of mental planes. Deathless rose, deathless flame, all those hierarchies of planes. See, in Canto 10, Canto 11, Canto 12, all those planes, Canto 13 also, they have described all those things. So now there is no more further climbing, there are no further worlds of thought. There, Paul climbing hierarchy of worlds. He stood on a wide arc of summit space. He, of course, stands for Ashapati. On a wide arc, lying alone with an enormous self of mind. Atman, Mano Atman, self of mind. Mana Atman. Self is Atman. Mind, Atman. Self is Atman.
Yeah, self is Atman.
Yeah. And therefore it's because self, mind self. It is Manomaya Purusha, you can put it this way, basically. Alone with an enormous self of mind. He is indifferent, which held all life in a corner of its vase. So that is the greatness of the self of mind. Whole life, every creation which is there below, it is holding in its clasp completely. In its vase, not single, not vast, pluralism, which held all life in a corner of its vase, which held all life, spondy, in a core, an abyss, or of its vase, spirit I am. Omnipotent, immobile, and aloof. That is the character of this mind, self of mind. Omnipotent, immobile, aloof. It keeps away from everything else. In the world which sprang from it, the worlds of thought, in the world which sprang from it, it took no part. So all the mental activities which are going on here, in them, he does not take any part at all, you see.
The self of mind.
Because self of mind is only supporting. He is present. He does not participate. You see. It took no part. It gave no heed to the paeans of victory. We may sing the joy, exultations of victory, triumphs of victory. But okay, keep on enjoying. At the same time, if you are sorrowful, worried about that also, because he is talking of the indifferent sky. In the world which sprang from it, it took no part, it gave no heed to the paeans of victory, it was indifferent to its own defeats. What are its own defeats? All these creations of mind, they have got failures, they have got limitations, but it is indifferent even to them also. So whether it is a victory or a defeat, it doesn't care, it remains. Whether it is a sorrow or a joy, it doesn't care. It remains detached completely from that thing. Indifferent. It was, see, he is using the word indifferent twice. Here you have got indifferent in the very first sentence, and then again you have got here indifferent to its own defeat. It heard a cry of grief and made no sign. So he is not cruel, he is not pitiless, but he is not concerned about that. He is not concerned about that. It heard the cry of grief, made no sign. Means the kind of a vital element which is there, of life element which is there, which will respond to this thing, that is totally absent from it. Normally, when you see a person who is suffering, who is miserable or is happy, you cannot participate in that. Feel sorry for that if he is sad. So that is the element of life, vital. So the vital is totally absent here, completely absent in space. It heard the cry of grief and made no sign. Perfect monosyllabic line. It heard the cry of grief and made no sign. Iambic line, perfect monosyllabic iambic line. Impartial, fell his gaze on evil and good. Whether you are dying or we are enjoying, it doesn't care at all about them. It saw the destruction come and did not move. He sees all these things happening. Well, that will be a real terrible thing. If the Holocaust is going on, and this self of mind is going to be there, it will be unconcerned about it. Let it go on. How does it matter for it, you see? Or it is a victory cry afterwards. About that also, it is unconcerned completely, see. It saw destruction come and did not move. An equal cause of things, equal cause. Well, so whether it is good or bad, it is all that thing is for it equal. A lonely seer and master of his multitude of forms. So this line is overflowing. An equal cause of things, a lonely seer and master. In Japa, it's an overflowing line. A lonely seer and master of its multitude of forms. It acted not, but bore all thoughts and deeds. Well, it is holding them all, but it does not participate in them at all, you see. All thoughts and deeds. The witness Lord of nature's myriad and. So he is the witness, he is Sakshi. Witness means Sakshi, who observes it, who knows it. He is a witness, Sakshi. Observes it. Nature's myriad act, consenting to the movement of her force, her nature's force. Her force. Consenting. So he is witness, he is the giver of consent. Giver of consent, that is Anumanta. One who gives consent is called in Sanskrit Anumanta. Hanuman. Yes, it's okay for me. Unless he gives the consent, unless he says okay, she will not do anything at all. He may be watching it, observing it, but she is helpless. He has to give consent. Then only she will work. He is Sakshi, he is also Anumanta, the giver of consent. Consenting to the movements of her force. She will not work otherwise. His mind reflected this vast quietism. This vast quietism of the self of mind. Quietism of the self of mind. His mind, Ashwapati's mind reflected this vast quietism. So, even his mind, that self of mind is working there. In a word, you have here the pure experience of silent Brahman. Pure experience of the silent Brahman. What Sri Aurobindo had in January 1908. Silent Brahman, January 1908 in Baroda. His mind reflected this vast quietism. This witness hush is the thinker's secret base. Witness hush. Well, this silence, the silent Brahman is the thinker's secret base. Thinker, the divine thinker, the true thinker, Manishi, who thinks. Secret base. Hidden in silent depths, the word is formed. Hidden in silent depths, the word is formed. It is in silence that the word is formed. The mantra arises in the spiritual silence. The power of expression, the true power of expression comes in silence, in the depth of silence. Word is found, that is mantra. Word here stands for Brahma, word. Mantra, word is found. In fact, that is the Vedic theory of mantra. It is in the depth of silence that the voice is heard, the word is formed, the expression comes out. Hidden, silent, the word is formed. From hidden silences, the act is born. Well, this is kind of an elaboration. The word is formed, therefore an act, action. Into the voiceful mind, the laboring word, that is the power of expression, in secrecy wraps the seed, the eternal sows. The eternal is sowing the seed, and that seed is wrapped in secrecy. Silence, that is the mystic birthplace of the soul. It is the depth of silence, passive Brahman is the birthplace of the soul. It is from there that his soul is coming out, you see, in expression. The word, the power of expression, that is the birthplace of soul, you see. In God's supreme, withdrawn and timeless self, God's supreme, withdrawn and timeless self, that is the self of mind, supreme home. A seeing self and potent energy met. How is the soul formed? How the birth of the soul takes place? Because in God's supreme, withdrawn, timeless, in God's hush, seeing self and potent energy meet. And it is in their meeting that the soul takes the birth. Seeing self and potent energy. These are the equivalent terms of presence and power. Presence and power. The divine as present, his power, his Shakti, when the being and consciousness force is the potent energy. Seeing self, that comes from the being, existence, being. You see. So when being and consciousness force, they met together, then in the silence, the soul is born. The birthplace of the soul, you see. It is the creation of the seeing self and potent energy. She is the creator. She gives birth to the soul. He caused a seed in her and she gives the birth to the soul, you see. In God's supreme, withdrawn and timeless, it all happened in the silence of God. The silence knew itself and thought took form. Well, that is how the thought is born. Self-made from the dual power, creation rose. Self-made from the dual power. Which dual power? Seeing self and potent energy. Presence and power. That's a dual character. Being and nature. That's a dual power. That is the dual power. Self-made from the dual power. Creation rose. Well, that is the theory of creation. How can creation really arise? It can arise only in the coming together of the being, the soul, this divine soul, and his force, consciousness force. When they come together, then only the creation comes out. Self-made from the dual power, creation rose in the still self. He lived and it in him. It's a very rhetorical line. He, of course, stands for Ashwapati. Now, in that hush where this creation arises, where the soul takes birth, it is in that hush, in the silent self, Ashwapati is living. He lived in the silent self. In the still self, he lived. And it in him. So he lives in silence and silence lives in him. See? That is the rhetorical line. That is the rhetorical element of Savitri, you see. It is not enough that you live in it. It must also live in you. It must also live in you. In the still self, he lived and it in him. Again, a perfect monosyllabic line. In the still self body, he lived and it in him. I am. I have taken I am. In mute, immemorable listening depths, its vastness and its stillness were his own. Its of that creation. Its vastness and its stillness were his own. Ashwapati. One being with it, he grew wide. So that is what makes him wide, embracing, powerful, free. When he is now able to live in the still self, and when the still self lives in him, then he grows wide, powerful, free. He grows. So that is the condition for being really In other words, you can now work out what you want to do. If you will something, that can happen only when the still self lives in you and you live in the still self. One being with a tree group, wide, powerful, free, as one who builds his own imagined scene. I'll give you an example. As one who builds his own imagined. So you imagine something, a beautiful valley, beautiful creature or whatever it is you see, and loses not himself in what he sees. He has built something, that is the character of the silent Brahman, or the self of mind, that is his character. Loses not himself in what he sees. Spectator of a drama, self-conceived, he looked on the world and watched its motive thought. He has identified himself completely with the self of mind. Ashwapati has identified himself completely with the self of mind. He looked on the world and watched his motive thought. With the burden of luminous prophecy in their eyes. What does he want? That this kind of a prophecy in the eyes of that. What is going to happen tomorrow, future? His forces with their feet of wind and fire. His forces with their feet of wind and fire. Wind and fire. Vayu and Agni. Wind and fire. Vayu and Agni. His forces with their feet of wind and fire. So the cosmic, the transcendental elements are there. He looked on the world and watched its motive thought with the burden of luminous prophecy in their eyes. His forces with their feet of wind and fire. What a line, very beautiful line, very outer, deep line. Arisen from the dumbness in his soul, because he has identified himself completely with the self of mind. So these are arising from the self of mind. All now he seems to understand and know. So after a long, long journey, he seems to understand. Perhaps he has not still understood. All now he seems to understand and know. Well, it means that there is still something more, which may have to be understood. All now, Spondi, he seems to understand I am and know I am. All now is seems to understand and know. So it is the self of mind that he is able to understand. Yes.
Between the sentence 10 and 11, there is one more line here.
Well, in your book, maybe in the revised edition is there. Yes, that's right. Yeah, in the revised edition is there. Yes, I know. Yeah. It's true. All now he seemed to understand and know. Desire came not, nor any gust of will. Well, he is a detached person, kind of indifferent. He has identified himself completely with the self of mind. So there is kind of an indifference. Desire came not, nor any gust of will. The great perturbed inquirer lost his task. Nothing was asked nor wanted any more. So that is the kind of a character he has acquired from the self of mind. There he could stay, Ashwapati, where the self, the silence one. The character of the self of mind he has acquired, the silent Brahman. His soul had peace. It knew the cosmic whole. So that is the nature. So once you have completely identified yourself with that peace, so it is a kind of identification with silent Brahman. So this is the experience Sri had at a very early stage in January 1908. 1st or 2nd of January 1908, he had the experience of silent Brahman, and then he knows from that what is peace, what is the cosmic whole. Now, this is the experience he has with the silent Brahman. Then suddenly, but this is not sufficient. This is a kind of a dangerous experience also. You see, this is a kind of a dangerous experience also. His soul had peace. You can get lost. You can forget yourself completely. You can forget, be oblivious of the mission for which you had taken birth. If you get stuck in this peace, in the silent self, then you may lose sight of the mission which you are supposed to do completely. In fact, that is a kind of a trap. If you have the experience of only silent Brahman, the danger is that the world will appear to you an illusion, Maya. The world will appear to you an illusion, Maya. In fact, that was the kind of a danger which was present, which Shankaracharya did not realize. He had the experience of passive Brahman, only passive Brahman, and the experience of passive Brahman is a very high experience, spiritual experience. Only experience of passive Brahman made for him the world an illusion. Only that pure self alone is there. This is all mithya, false, wrong. Dismiss it off, give it up, forget about it, get out of it, and live in the silent Brahman. That was the kind of a thing which happened in the case of Shankara. His soul had peace, Ashwapati has soul. It knew the cosmic whole, but then something miraculous happened. Ashwapati is kind of all the while protected by something, by somebody. His soul is alert to that thing. It responds to those things. And suddenly a luminous finger fell. Now, suddenly, he is not anticipating the guiding spirit of Ashwapati. The demon of Ashwapati is there. Look, Ashwapati, you may fall into a trap. And it is guarding him. It is protecting him. This is not the end for you. You have something else to do, something more to do. That luminous finger did not fall on Shankara. It did not fall on Shankara. So what happened? He became the creator of Mayavad, Mithya. Then suddenly a luminous finger, suddenly, because it would have been very difficult. So it does not allow him to disappear into that peace, complete. Does not allow him. Look, passive Brahman is not enough. In fact, suddenly, how suddenly? Next moment, next instance, it happened within 3 months. Just suddenly stand for 3 months.
Why?
Just suddenly stand for 3 months.
Why?
Sri Bandhu had the experience of silent Brahman. On the 1st January 1908, he had the experience of Vasudeva everywhere, in the prison, in the jail, in the magistrate, in the trees, in the forest, everywhere. He said divine, 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 the active Brahman. That happened around July, August. So that suddenly is about 3 months. You see. Is about, n'est-ce pas? Then suddenly a luminous, he was not anticipating. So you see, these two very major experiences of the active Brahman and silent Brahman, he has simultaneously within 2 or 3 months like that, you see. Shankara never had the active Brahman at all. The luminous finger did not fall at all on him, you see. But this soul was completely prepared. Dynamic oneness, silent self and dynamic, that is what we got in the 3rd canto of the 1st book, you see. Then suddenly a luminous finger fell on all things seen or touched or heard or felt. So every power of sense expression, seen, touched, heard, felt, smelt also, you see. On all things seen or touched or heard or felt. Again, a perfect monosyllabic. On all things seen, I am spontaneous, or touched I am, or heard I am, or felt I am, and showed his mind that nothing could be known. Mind is not the instrument for knowing everything, for anything. Nothing can be known by mind, and showed his mind that nothing could be known. That must be reached from which all knowledge comes. That is the luminous finger. That is the luminous finger. That must be reached from which all knowledge comes. So that is the luminous finger which is falling on you. Look, yes, you have acquired the quality of silent Brahman, passive Brahman and all that thing. You have become indifferent to suffering, ignorance, misery, mortality and all that thing. All right, that is kind of a necessary foundation, but that is not sufficient. It is necessary but not sufficient. The sufficiency will come with a dynamic aspect. With the dynamic aspect, you see. That must be reached from which all knowledge comes. Again, almost a monosyllabic line. The skeptic ray disrupted all that same. The skeptic ray, that luminous figure, that knowledge, that mind disrupted all that same, the smote at the very roots of thought and sense. You have been doubting, so it is now questioning all that kind of a thing. What is it all that for? You see? A universe of nations, they have grown, all that seems, they have grown, aspiring to a superconscious sun. Those children of eternity, aspiring to a superconscious sun, playing in shine and rain from heavenly skies. They never can win, however high their reach or overpass, however keen their probe. Therefore, there is a kind of a doubt corroded even the means to think. You are thinking, but then doubt itself is doubting. Doubt is doubting doubt. Doubt is doubting doubt. A doubt corroded even the means to think. Distrust was thrown upon mind's instrument. So that is the character of mind. You cannot really trust mind when it comes to the higher spiritual grade. Mind is an instrument in a field of ignorance for a certain purpose, but that is useless, that is vain, that is a kind of an abstraction when you go to the higher spiritual planes. Mind's instrument, all that it takes for reality is a shining coin. Yes, it is a glorious coin, bright coin, shining coin. All that it takes for reality, that mind takes for reality is shining coin. Proved fact, fixed inference, deduction, clear. So these are the shining coins. Proved fact, fixed inference, deduction, clear. That is what mind does. Analytical mind does. Proved fact, observed fact. Fixed inference, you infer something. Deduction, clear. Firm theory, assured significance. So how many examples he has given, you see. Appeared as frauds upon time, credit, bank. So whether it is a proved fact, mind, fixed inference, etc. They are after all what? Frauds upon time's credit bank, in time's bank. Or assets valueless in truth's treasury. See, he has given a complete picture all. Now, proved fact, fixed inference, deduction clear, firm theory, assured significance. Proved fact, fixed inference. This is a kind of a Miltonic description. Miltonic description. Milton in his Paradise Lost speaks of free will, fixed fate. Free will, fixed fate. It's like that, you see. So it is a kind of an echo of that phrase. Free will, fixed fate. Proved fact, fixed inference. Deduction clear. Firm theory assured significance. Appeared as frauds upon time's bank. Or assets valueless in truth's treasury. What a pity. And ignorance on an uneasy throne. Well, obviously. So that is the work of the finger which has fallen on him. It has brought out the kind of a limitation which is there with the mental knowledge. It is showing up all the limitation. Travestied with a fortuitous sovereignty, complete. A figure of knowledge, garbed in dubious world, a tinsel thought forms brightly inadequate. So he is describing, he is becoming very poetic, describing in various ways again. A laborer in the dark, dazzled by half light. Half light, mind's light, your own mind's light. He is half dazzled, half light. Laborer, he is a laborer mind. In the dark, dazzled. In the dark, dazzled by half light. The phrase is a laborer, that mind, in the dark, dazzled by half light. Dazzled by mind's light. You see. What it knew was an image in a broken glass. An image in a broken glass. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. It sees something, but it does not know the truth behind that thing. It does not know the truth. All the ideas in its vast repertory of that mind were like the mutterings of a transient cloud. Mutterings of a transient. The cloud comes, mutters something, goes away. That spent itself in sound and left no trace. Now, this is, I will say, a kind of an echo from Eliot's Hollow Man. Eliot's Hollow Man, you see, a kind of an echo. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. What it knew was an image in a broken glass. Broken glass. That comes from Eliot. Spent in a sound and left no trace. The world began with a bang but ended with a whimper. That is what the Hollow Man is. We'll read that part of Eliot. I got copied down here. Hollow Man, the last section of the Hollow Man, last one. Eyes I dare not meet in dream. The Hollow Man is telling what? Eyes I dare not meet in dream. He is neither allowed to go to hell nor to the other world. He is standing in between because he looks hollow. So hell does not allow him to come because he is a hollow fellow. He is also not capable of. Eyes I dare not meet in dream. In death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. These eyes, these dreams, the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. Sunlight on a broken column. So here you have got the same thing here. Broken glass, broken column, you see. Broken column, broken glass. There the eyes, sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging and voices are in the winds singing. The voices are the winds singing. More distant and more solemn than a fading star, than a fading star, than a fading star. More distant and more solemn than a fading star. Hollow men live in a world of broken symbols and images. Broken images. They are afraid to look at proper people. To be looked at, a shadow has paralyzed all their activities. The Mulberry Bush song turns into a song about the end of the world. How is the world going to end? The children's song, the nursery song. It ends out with a bright explosion, but with a quiet whimper. Between the idea and the reality, between the idea and the reality. That's a great statement. Between the idea and the reality. These are the last lines of Hollow Man. Between the motion and the act falls the shadow, the overmind shadow. So he somehow caught it. Maybe he is not able to understand that thing, but that is what it really means. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act falls the shadow, overmind shadow. Shadow, S capital, S capital. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. He is repeating 3 times. This Hollow Man is repeating between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. That spent itself in sound and left no trace. That's a whimper. Perfect echo of these lines, you see. Hollow Man, this is from Hollow Man, what I read just now. No, what the lines which I read out to you are from Eliot's poem, narrative poem, Hollow Man. The title of the poem is Hollow Man. See, they are neither allowed to enter into hell nor into worlds of higher life because they are hollow. There are no contents in them. And therefore the world begins with a bang but ends with a whimper, finally. You have got it. That spent itself in sound and left no trace.